Okay guys, so this is the 2S Lipo roundup for the micro batteries. I've got 13 of them here. This is a portion of the batteries I have. There's a bunch of other ones that I've gotten recently. I haven't even charged them or used them yet. These are the ones that I've actually been using, and I've gotten some numbers here. I'll throw up some numbers on the screen at the very end. It's this chart here. You can't see it. It's on my phone. It's too tiny. I got weights, got some internal resistance measurements, that kind of stuff. If you are lost about what I'm talking about, please click on the card here in the corner and watch the intro video to get the background on what's going on here, because otherwise you'll probably be lost. These other batteries that I have that are not in this, of the 13 here, they probably won't be coming. You probably won't see that video for probably about another month, because I'm not even going to be flying those batteries. I'm moving on to some 3S batteries. So I'll probably do a 3S initial 3S Lipo roundup first, and I'll come back to the second batch of 2S Lipos because there's just too many of them. And I only not want to just show you numbers, but I want to fly them and then tell you if the numbers are consistent with how they perform. And the only way I can tell you that is if I actually fly them and use them regularly, not just once or twice. So that's why it's going to take some time. So first off, I just want to go over some of the batteries that I had used previously quite a bit, and then give you some of those numbers, and then I'll talk about the new ones. So my favorite battery used to be this one here. This is a Nanotech 300 milliamp hour. It's pretty small. It's a 45 to 90C battery. It has a JST connector. I use this a lot because it was really light, and it was 17.4 grams. The internal resistance numbers on this one were from 20.0 to 21.7. Those are the two cells on this particular battery. And the other batteries were consistent in the same range. That's not a bad number. 20 is a pretty good number compared to some of, I guess, some of the more worse batteries here. For example, this giant power one here, I'll talk about that in a second. And I use this a lot because it was light and it gave me pretty good performance on power setups that were not as demanding. However, as I moved on to bigger motors and bigger props, this JST connector just wasn't able to cut it, and my flight times were really short on this, on the bigger motors. So I've moved on to these other batteries, obviously. But this used to be my favorite, and one of the reasons why I performed well, I had really low internal resistance compared to these other couple ones I'll show you. I use this giant power battery. This is also 2S 300 milliamp hour, but this is only rated 35C. It's got this ridiculously long JST connector. This one didn't perform as well. This one weighed 18.1 grams, a little bit heavier, and the internal resistance numbers were 32.8 to 35.1. And it showed. It's quite a bit, has quite a bit less punch-out power compared to the other one on the same setup. So if I was using these two batteries, and I actually did testing on speed runs before I couldn't fly at that park anymore, where I compared these two batteries, and this one, the Nanotech, performed better, and that's because of the lower internal resistance numbers, which is consistent with the results from that testing. So taking these results, and I also wanted to show you this other battery that I flew, and the reason I'm showing this is a 450. And I have a lot of 450s now, 2Ss. This is a 40C Genesis power battery. You can't get this anymore. I think it's discontinued. And this one weighed 30.8 grams. So they're all about that range for the 450s. JST connector, and this had a internal resistance number from 21.4 to 24.0. So pretty similar to the Nanotech. But the reason it didn't perform as well as the Nanotech is the weight difference. This is about 31 grams. This is about 18 grams or 17.5 grams. So that extra 13 or 14 grams made a pretty big difference in terms of the performance on the lower power setups. And then here's a battery that I wasn't really using as much previously. This is a Nanotech 370 25 to 40C. And this one is, it's kind of similar in size to the 450. It's obviously thinner and weighs 25.6 grams. So a little bit lighter than the 450, but it has less capacity. But these numbers were better on internal resistance. It's 13.8 to 14.9. And what I found was that on the heavier setups or the bigger motors, this battery actually performed pretty good relative to this battery. I think this has bigger capacity and a lower internal resistance number compared to this. So the amp draw was, well, whenever I had it more amp draw, this one would perform better. And actually this tells you something about C rating here. It says 45 to 90 C and this says 25 to 40 C, but this one has better numbers in terms of internal resistance and performance. So I don't really ever believe C ratings on batteries. I think it's just a number they just stick on something, and you'll see that there's a variety of C ratings on all these batteries, but I don't think they really mean much. It might give you some idea whether it's good or not, but generally speaking, I don't think it really means a whole lot. Okay, so moving on here, this is actually a pretty good battery. This is an Eachine 450. It's an 80C rated battery. This is the one that came with the Aurora 90 and Aurora 100. It's constantly out of stock, and the reason is it's got good performance. This weighs 30.9 grams, and it has an internal resistance of 8.5 to 8.7, so it's below 10. So pretty much anything around 10, below 20, is going to be pretty good, I think, in terms of these numbers for these type of batteries. Obviously, if you go to like a 4S 1800 milliamp hour battery, you're going to see internal resistance numbers below 5 typically, but these are, we're talking about 2S batteries here, and they're smaller capacity, and so that's why these numbers are in that range. So I'm thinking the numbers in low 10 are going to be pretty good, and this is probably why this battery is out of stock all the time, because people have discovered this battery is a good battery. It can be used in a lot of situations, and it works pretty well. The downside is it has a JST connection, and this is a bottleneck, I think. You can only get so much power with that connector, especially on something like an 1106 motor. It's going to be drawing a lot of power, and on some of the higher end motors, this connector got pretty hot. So on really beefy motors, you're going to have to go to a XT30. So here I've got two batteries here from GNB. They're 350s. They're 80 to 160 C in terms of the in terms of the C rating. They have two different connectors. One's got an XT30, one's got a JST. The weights on these, let's see here. The JST weighs 23.5 grams, and the XT30 weighs 26.9 grams. So obviously. You got a really long wire here, a bigger gauge wire. I think that's 16 gauge wire, and the XT30 connector adds for additional weight. The numbers are a little bit different between the two. The JST connector one has internal resistance from 11.2 to 17.0, and the one with the XT30 has lower numbers. They are from, they're actually both cells were the same. They were 8.1. Honestly, to tell you the truth, the difference between 17.0 and 8.1 in terms of flight and performance is hard to tell, especially for something this small. The weight difference is a few grams. So I was flying things on, these are also different setups, not the exact same setup, so that also makes a difference. So I would say something like the 350 with the JST would be good on lighter setups like 1104s, like 6,000 kV or lower, with a maybe a 2-inch prop. And then if you want to go to a more powerful setup, use the 350 here with the XT30 because you're going to be drawing more current. But anything with that is drawing that much power, you probably don't want to be using this 350 anyway, because the flight times are going to be really short. So this is really like for drag racing, where you want a really light battery but pretty good power output for super short flight times, probably under 2 minutes, but you're just going all out and super fast, maybe like doing a lot of freestyle, something like that. So next I want to talk about these two GNB batteries. They're 450s. This is a flat style battery here, 50 to 100 C, XT30 connector, and this one weighs 30.5 grams and had internal resistance numbers from 9.5 to 9.6, so pretty low, pretty good. These are comparable to the the E-Sheen battery here, that was like 8 point something. What was it? It was 8.5, 8.7, and this one was 9.5, 9.6. So yeah, hardly can tell, but this has an XT30, so that does make a difference in terms of the performance. In terms of like the wire gauge and stuff, and the length of the wire, other than the fact that it's inconvenient to mount the battery, I hadn't noticed much difference in terms of the wire gauge, at least yet. I'm pretty sure pretty soon it's going to matter, but for things so far, the wire hasn't been getting hot on the really high-end power setups, so I'm not going to be paying too much attention to that. As long as you have the right connector, I think it's allowing the electricity to flow. What I thought was interesting is here's a 450, and this is a 50 to 100C. And then you got this battery here. This is also from G&B, but it's a stick-style battery. And this is a 80 to 160C, so higher C rating. It's got the same connector, same length wire, XT30, similar gauge. This one weighs 29.1 grams, and the other one here, this weighs 30.5 grams. It's a little bit heavier. But the internal resistance numbers on this one here were from 10.2 to 11.4, so a little bit higher than this one here. So even though this is a 50 to 100C and we're talking 80 to 160C, the IR numbers are pretty much the same. And to be totally honest, flying these, if you put them on a quad and didn't tell me which one you put on there, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference which one was on there. They performed pretty much identically. And I think that for the most part, any of these numbers, and most of these numbers are going to be in the below 20 range here, all these are going to be fairly good. Unless you're running a specific really high-end setup where you need like the very, very lowest internal resistance numbers, I don't know if you're going to be able to tell much difference in terms of performance. Hey guys, Albert from the future here. I'm editing this video. Just wanted to add that when it comes to a lot of the batteries that come with the ready-to-fly drones that are already built, those batteries typically aren't the greatest, and on average I would say that their IR numbers are in the 40 to 60 range, and I think that pretty much anything in the 2S category around the 400 milliamp hour, 600 milliamp hour range, if you're above 50 to 60, you're going to get pretty poor performance. And some of the really bad batteries, like the ones, like there's one that came with the Chaser 88, that one was like 70 something. That one gave you, would give me flips of death on the higher power setup. So something to keep in mind. Generally speaking, outside of the E-Sheen 450 that came with the Aurora 100, I haven't seen a battery that came with a ready to fly that was in this category of this batch, where they are around basically under 30. So that's something to keep in mind for batteries that you are considering in the ready to fly micro drones. I would, if you want performance, my recommendation is to buy one of the batteries off the list here. So in addition to the G&B 450 here, stick style, there's some more stick style batteries here. We got a Tattoo, a Zeus power, and a Beta FPV. Let's go over these really quickly. Again, these all perform fairly similarly. They'll have XT30s. This is a Tattoo 450, 75C, and 28.9 grams. And the thing about this one, two cells, one cell was 8.0 and the other one was 13.9. And so that's pretty wide range. 14 versus 8, it's a 6 number difference. Honestly, it didn't feel like the performance was much different from the other stick batteries here, the 450s. But what was kind of strange was that because of the range and the IR number between one cell versus the other, I noticed that the at the end of the battery, like when you got to around towards the end of the flight, around 7 volts, the voltage would just drop off off a face of a cliff. It would go from like 7 and 6.9, and then all of a sudden you'd be at like 5.3, and then it would crash. I don't know what it is. I noticed that batteries that have variation between cells, where one is worse than the other, I think maybe one goes dead and then the other one is still pumping out the power, and then all of a sudden that goes dead, and then that's when you see the voltage just drop off a cliff. So that's something I noticed about this particular one. I didn't notice that any other batteries had a disparity like this, and a lot of the tattoos seem to be like that too. The 650 tattoo here, this is a bigger, heavier battery. This one was 38.1 grams, XD30, 8.5 on one cell and 12.1 on the other cell. This is a bigger battery, so I didn't see the voltage drop off a cliff like on the other one. So I'm not really sure if that was just a fluke on that particular battery, but I'm noticing that on a lot of tattoo batteries there's inconsistencies between the cells, so that's something to be aware of. Okay, so we got this other one here, another stick battery. It's called the Zeus Juice 444. Looks like the same size as the other ones. I think this is a 450 as well. 75C, and this one weighs 32.5 grams, and the numbers are 13.7 to 14.0. So yeah, you know, it's a little bit worse than the other ones, but I can't tell the difference in terms of the actual performance. It's got the same, I think this is a little bit thicker gauge wire. This is a 16 gauge wire on this one versus the GNB is I think this is an 18 gauge wire. Yeah, this is an 18 gauge wire. And then here, this is, well, I think this is the second to last battery. This is the Beta FPV. Alright, so this is the Beta FPV 450, 80 to 160C. This one weighs 29.9 grams, and the numbers are 9.6 to 10.9. This one looks pretty much like the GNB battery here. So if you see, got the same gauge wire here, it's about the same length, same with the balance connector. Pretty similar numbers. You can see the size here is the same. This one has a heat shrink on the whole thing, versus the GN battery does not have heat shrink. It just has this sticker that goes around, that wraps around the edge here, but this edge here is exposed, so that does save a little bit of weight. But it does tend to leave the battery a little more exposed. You're gonna get some more dents if you crash, but obviously, you know, if you crash, even this one's gonna get dented, even with the little plastic heat shrink on here. So you can see here amongst the stick batteries, they're all pretty much the same size, and all of these perform pretty similarly, and all the weights are pretty much about the same. So now you're going to be asking me, okay, what's the best battery, of course, and I think that the answer is difficult to say because it depends on what you want to use. And like, obviously this is the heaviest battery here, 650. This is going to give you the longest flight time, and I actually use this on the really heavy setups like the 1106 Emax motor, the 6000 kV, and the Spintech 1106 8000 kV motor. This is pretty much the only battery that's going to give me any kind of flight time. I tried using like the other 450, smaller 450s that were lighter, but I was only getting like 2 minutes on those, if that. I was getting about 3 minutes on the 650 because those are just drawing so much power. So if you're asking the question, what's the best battery is going to depend on what you're flying. And I don't know what you're flying, and so oftentimes people ask me that question and they don't tell me what they're flying. So I'm not going to answer that question anymore, because I basically just I get that question and I ask them, oh, what are you flying? And then I get a vague answer and I'm not sure what to recommend. What I'm going to do to answer this question for pretty much everything going forward is, my answer to you is watch my videos, and in the description below the video there's going to be, you know, links to all the parts and stuff. And what I'm going to be doing from now on is putting my link to a recommended battery for that particular drone or that I have in that video. So typically I'll do several flights and I'll try and, you know, I'll test out a few of these batteries, see which ones I think I like that work well on that particular setup. And so if you look at that parts list and you see that kind of motor I'm using there and how much it weighs and the prop I'm using, if your drone is similar in that setup, if you decide you want to build that particular drone, go with the recommended Lipo. Because out of all these, you know, what I'm going for is about a 3-minute flight time, maybe 3.5-minute flight time, with the best performance that I can possibly get. Obviously, you can go lighter to a smaller battery, save weight, and reduce your flight time, you get better performance. Or you can, if you want to go for flight time, you go for a heavier battery. You know, you're going to reduce your performance, but you're going to be able to fly longer. And of the batteries that are here, you know, I think these are all pretty decent. You know, probably with the exception of this just Genesis power battery, which you can't get anyway. And I think this one here, this giant power battery, is not that great. But you know, for the right setup, you know, like I would say a really light drone, like with 1102, 1103 motor, 2-inch prop, this will be just fine. You know, once you get to the bigger props, bigger motors, then these little batteries are going to be kind of suffering. Then you want to go to a bigger battery like these 450s. And I think that the 450s is probably, like, right now for 2S on a 2.5-inch prop, this is probably the sweet spot battery in terms of weight and performance. That's what I'm thinking right now. So if you guys want to know which batteries I recommend for a particular drone, just go back and look at some of my previous videos, and I'll start putting in the batteries I like for that drone in those videos. I'm probably going to be doing that slowly. Some of them I've already started putting them in there. And if there's one that you see that you want to know which one I recommend for which drone, I'll go ahead and I'll update that description with the battery I think will work best for that particular drone. Also, I'll go ahead and I'll flash the little chart here up on the screen so you guys can see a summary of all the numbers. Because I know that some people were asking about that last time because I was just talking about it, but I didn't show a chart on the screen. So I'll go ahead and flash it up here now so you guys can take a look at that and do the comparisons yourself. I've sorted this chart by weight of the battery. So that'll do it for this 2S Lipo roundup for this first set of batches. This is part 1 of another batch down the road at some point. Let me know if there's batteries you think I should test that are better than this. If they're like kind of similar to this one, I'm not going to buy them. But if you think you found a battery that's like way better than this, let me know and I'll think about getting those, because there's kind of no point in testing batteries that are similar or worse than the batches I have here, because well, you know, it just doesn't really do anything for anybody. Because there's a large selection of batteries out there now that are pretty good, that'll work fine, that don't give you death rolls and brownouts and stuff like that. So that's why I'm thinking this is a pretty good batch right now. But if you think you have a battery that is way better than these, then definitely do let me know. I would be interested in finding out about that. So the next roundup I'll be working on is a bunch of micro 3S batteries. I think they're going to be in the 400 to 600 milliamp hour range. Not a whole lot of those. I'm still trying to collect a few more of those. I've just been flying like 2 or 3 of them, so it might be a little while before that video comes out, because I want to at least get maybe about 8 to 10 of those. I think I only got like 3 or 4 right now, so that video might take a little while to come out. And I know that everyone like wants me to put these videos out right away, but you know, I want to use these batteries. I've used all of these batteries. You know, I want to give you feedback on whether or not they're any good or not. And you know, I think that these internal resistance numbers are actually pretty consistent with my theory. The theory I talked about in the first intro video, that if you have some pretty low numbers, you're going to get pretty good performance. They're going to, you know, give you, they're just going to work for you. And I think that it's working out, and that's why I want to test those. You know, the reason I test that and fly them is, I want to find, you know, an example of where it's a low internal resistance number. Like say if I found a battery like this E-Sheen where it was below 10, but it started giving me death rolls right away, well then that throws my whole theory out the window. But I don't think that's going to happen. But, you know, that's why I want to actually fly these. I can just charge them up, say, oh, this is a good battery, but that doesn't really tell you anything. It may or may not be. I think that you have to actually fly these to really know how they hold up. And then you discover weird things like this tattoo, where if the cells are kind of unbalanced, you get things like where the voltage drops off at the very end of the flight, which is kind of scary. So stuff like that. I haven't discovered that with that kind of weird thing going on with any other batteries, but something like that you find out when you fly it. So anyway, guys, I'm rambling on here. I'm going to go ahead and finish this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.